And with that, I would like to invite Arthur Blank, Kenny Blank, Joshua Blank, and Max Blank to the stage.
This is like Oprah.
I got to say, I am a little nervous. But first, before we get started, I want to thank Arthur for not only agreeing to be on stage and doing this, and how eternally grateful I am that we can do this all together, but also he rearranged a trip from overseas to come back just for this today. So thank you so much for doing that. It's actually the first time all three Blank boys and their dad have been on stage together. Kenny and I were talking about that this morning. It is being taped, so it'll be there for posterity. So think about what you're going to say. But I wanted to start, there is a group family shot that is going to come up. I think Joel. Oh. So the football goes back to the time that our kids were little and Kenny was still a young man.
Thanks.
But Arthur's mom is in that picture too, and I'm sure Arthur will touch on a lot of the values that you will hear about from him stemmed from Molly Blank. But I'm going to start with you, Arthur. You have 2 batches of kids, so named by your oldest daughter, Dina. The first batch is Kenny, Dina, and Danielle. Second batch is Joshua, Max, and Kylie. And the first batch was born before the incredible success of Home Depot, before the sports teams. They were all preteens to teenagers when Home Depot really kind of took off. Obviously, the second batch of kids was born at the height of your journey at Home Depot. Josh born in '97, the twins in 2001. How does that change how you viewed parenting? What did you worry about differently based on the incredible success of the company with the first batch as compared to the second batch? They're like cookies.
For the record, I'm firstborn of the first batch, so.
Yeah.
Special title.
He's FB.
Kenny's real name to me is FB, firstborn, first batch. So, or just FB because he's FB amongst all the 6 kids. But anyway, I think, and Stephanie, you'd remember this, and certainly Diana, first batch's mom. I've been blessed, with a lot of things in life, but 6 incredible children, but also 2 incredible wives, 3 incredible wives, but particularly 2 incredible mothers, Stephanie and Diana, who've been great partners in every sense of the word, and great mothers, great friends. Still have wonderful relationships with both of them, and I'm blessed with that. That's make a huge difference in my own life and to the lives of all of our children and their health. So I'm very fortunate in that regard. The answer to the question, I think, in some ways, the challenges with the second batch were a little greater than the first batch, and I say that only because, with batch 1, when we moved to Atlanta in 1978, and Home Depot started stores in 1979, both Bernie and I, and Jay is here, who's Bernie's partner and runs his foundation for him. Bernie and I had nothing. I mean, we literally had nothing. We both had to borrow every dollar we had to borrow to buy our first homes here. As you know, we ran through half of our startup money in the first year. So, that created an environment of, austerity and what have you, and a set of certain values, which really reached back both into Bernie's family and my own family, because my family and Bernie's family both came from very modest means. And so I think our first group of children, batch 1, much through their early lifetime, grew up in a situation where we didn't have all of the things that we have now. So, on occasion, when one of my grandchildren flies someplace and it's not on one of our planes, they'll look at their mother and they'll say, well, why are we flying? How can we fly on Pop-Pop's plane? Why do we got to fly commercially? So we didn't have that for, a very, very long period of time. But I would say this, and I think what is the most important thing, and is consistent, is that the set of values which have been instilled in our family, in my case, probably starting with my mother and my father, though my dad passed away when I was only 15 years old, those values have carried forward. And Stephanie's values and her family's values, and Diana and her values and her family's values, all of those, I think, have remained unchanged. And I think that's the beauty that we see in our children today, in all 6 of the children, is that they are values-based kids. They make great decisions. They're great role models. They give back to the community any way they can. They work their fannies off, and hopefully there'll be a question about that a little bit later, which I'm sure there will be. But, they stand up for doing the right things for the right reasons. And they do that without any prodding, because it's who they are. And so I've been very blessed, whether batch 1, 2, whatever batch's number it may be. These are incredible children, as you well know, Stephanie. And, thank you for your role along the way with that. So.
There's no more batches coming, right?
Yeah. There better not be any cookies.
There's no more batches coming to my knowledge, but I.
Yeah.
Because I had some of that at the end of batch 1. One of my children said to me, well, Dad, this is, right? I mean, okay. But then Steph and I got married. We were blessed having batch 2. So, but there are no plans for any more batches.
So I actually am going to get to what these 3 men are doing, but a little later, but I'm going to let them talk about that. But Kenny, I wanted to turn to you because you knew your dad before all the fame and fortune. What have been the biggest changes for you and what you've seen?
Well, first of all, thank you for bringing us all together in this very unusual format. We were talking about this morning. This is the first time we've had a conversation like this. I mean, on a personal note, I just want to reflect just how cool it is to have this multi-generational Blank family and pretty good-looking 3 generations of Blanks, wouldn't you say? I didn't get the blue memo, though.
So.
I mean, it's a treat for me and privilege to have brothers. And I grew up with 2 sisters, and then to have these young brothers that I have this multifaceted relationship with. My kids, Josh's and Max's age and Kylie's age, and so one of our favorite TV shows, I think, across the whole family is Modern Family, and we're living that all the time, and it's a real blessing. It's a real blessing to have those experiences. How has my dad changed over the years? Is that?
Well, you knew him when he didn't have all this fame and fortune. What are the changes that you've seen? How have you kind of navigated that? Because it's been a big change.
I think the way I think it's changed him is, and what I've observed is he's more reflective and more patient with life. And I just cannot imagine the pressure of coming here in Atlanta and starting this revolutionary business with no assurance of success, the incredible amount of pressure. And I think with time and with age and wisdom and grace and success has come, Dad, I think you're able to actually, I think you're finally at that age now where you're able to kind of sit back and look at it all in perspective and appreciate, celebrate, enjoy, keep your sense of humor. It's been an amazing journey.
So for Josh and Max, you guys were born with, knowing that your dad was so recognized in the Atlanta community. With the addition of the Falcons and Atlanta United, that's only grown exponentially. How have you 2 managed having a famous dad? What have you learned along the way about how you navigate all of that? And Josh, I'll start with you.
First, I would say stay off social media on Sundays, and now Saturdays as well. If you avoid that, then things will be good for the most part. But I would say, having 2 parents as incredible role models, and whether it be fame or not fame, I think just the values that they live by on a day-to-day basis is something that I've instilled within myself and truly carried along my path through life. And so I think, I've never looked at it as fame as much as just someone who is having a true impact in the community and in his city that he loves, and obviously now nationally as well. And so for me, it's just seeing the opportunities that he's opening up for so many people, and wanting to do the same thing throughout my life as well.
Going off of what Josh said,
Hold it close. Hold it close.
off of what Josh said, obviously both parents have done a great job of raising us to not take anything for granted. Obviously, we've been very fortunate growing up. That doesn't change the way that they instill values in us and what our beliefs are. I think growing up, it is tough a bit. In school, I mean, you have kids who love to make jokes about the Falcons or now Atlanta United, and they love to put their say in and say, you should draft this player, why'd you draft this guy? And so that's always tough, but that kind of comes with it, and you kind of get used to it, and you kind of see which people in your life are there for the right reasons at times, and you meet people who will kind of take advantage a bit, but I think that honestly helps a little bit growing up, find your real friends. And
The great thing is I don't get those suggestions or feedback because everyone knows I don't know anything about sports or football.
That is true. I'm going to agree with you, Kenny. But we can ask you about any movie and
That's
any
right.
director. So, Arthur, when you are out in public, you are always recognized and you are always gracious with all the people who come up to you. But do you ever long for times when you just have your privacy? And what do you do when you need that kind of alone time?
Well, I would say this. I mean, if, given the nature of the public assets, that we own, the Falcons, Atlanta United, our PGA Tour, Superstores, which have been a little bit in the press, PGA Tour this last week, and many of you in Atlanta may not be aware of it. We're the largest golf retailer today in the world, and approaching almost $1 billion in volume, with covering about half the United States. It's a very, very successful business. And obviously our ranches in Montana and our foundation, and blessed to have Faye here as our leadership. But I think when I'm in those settings, I understand that's part of my responsibility is to be an ambassador for our values. And one of our core values is to be close to the people that we're connected with, whether it be the people we serve, or whether it be the people, our customers, fans, guests, whatever it may be, suppliers, community. So, one of my jobs is to make sure that we are connected. In order to be connected, I don't essentially believe that you get the best connection electronically. I think it's all personal, in my opinion, hand to hand, flesh to flesh, hugs, whatever it may be. So I take time always, because it's not because it's a burden to me, it's an honor for me to have an opportunity to thank people for being supportive of all of our businesses, as well as our foundation work. So I don't consider that to be work. That's kind of sharing love with me. The other part of it is that, as you all know, is that we go home, we have 2 incredible golden retrievers that, meet me at the door every day. Whatever happens, they're there and they're unbelievable. And my home is it's a lovely home, and we have fortunately have a beach home as well, and we have a ranch home. So I get an opportunity to go to places to get away and into a natural setting that gives me some peace and quiet and chance to reflect and what have you. But I do think reflection, as Kenny pointed out, I think as you get older, at least in my case, and probably most people in this room, as you get older, you have an opportunity to reflect back on your life experiences and what's happened to you, what would you do differently, what would you do the same, what kind of counsel, wisdom would you pass on to your own children or to others. So that's a question that I'm asked often about, how do I feel about my own life. I'm going to go off script here a little bit, Stephanie, about, how do I feel about my success in life. And I would say that, the most important measure for me personally there's really not, the value of Home Depot. That's obviously up there in all the current businesses that we operate and run today. But really, that I have 6 incredible children, and all 6 incredible children want to spend time with their father. So as a parent gets older, you cannot receive a more gracious way to say, life well done, than have children say, I want to spend time with you. Because they have their own lives, they have their own families, they have their own opportunities, things that they need to do and be involved in. Yet my children continue to find ways to spend time with their father and their mother in ways that are really meaningful. So that, that I would say means the very most to me. So it's, that's to me the greatest blessing that I have. The second greatest blessing that I have happened last night and this morning. So Max slept over last night and went to the gym. I went in to say goodnight to him about 10:30, 11 o'clock, and he's on the treadmill with the treadmill only goes to a certain degrees going up. I think at 15 degrees. He had it at 15 degrees. So he worked out, did his whole workout, and then he went to bed, etc. So this morning I went to work out with my trainer, who I've worked with for 42 years now, very long period of time. And we had to adjust every weight in the room by half. Every weight in the room we had to adjust by half. And he hasn't seen Max in a while, and he said, I really got to see Max, because I'm not sure what he looks like now, but some version of the Great Hulk. But, it's another way you see yourself age, and that's a beautiful way. And Josh is the same way. And so anyway, but.
Well, Josh and Max in particular, you have grown up somewhat in the public eye. You've obviously had lots of wonderful experiences and privilege to help shape your life, but you also had parents who believed in the value of work and dedication to things. So we're going to talk a little bit about those early experiences and what you're doing now. So Max, your first job at age 12 was shoveling poop. Do you want to, what did that teach you?
At our ranch in Montana, my first job was to go into the horses' stalls and scoop the poop and put it into this little truck and take it down to the main barn, which was not always the most fun or the most exciting job, but I think it gave me an appreciation for all the jobs that are more thankless and not as seen to the public. And so from a early age, that gave me a better understanding of there's obviously all the jobs that everyone talks about and everyone sees, but there's a lot that goes into it that isn't talked about, and they're all just as important. So.
And Josh, you started working at training camp in middle school. In fact, you were washing the players' underwear, and you even earned a nickname from Roddy White. Can you share that?
Franchise.
Roddy White said, anybody that'll wash my jockstrap earns the nickname of Franchise. True story, by the way. But what did working at training camp teach you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it allowed me an opportunity to gain the respect of the organization and the players. I think, the nickname is very funny, but I think it also showed that Roddy felt like he had a true human connection with me. But I think to what Max was saying, it installed that hard work, and that was something that I've always believed in from a kid. Growing up, I also played soccer, ended up playing in college as well, and I think just the dedication and time commitment it takes to play sports, and being on the athlete side, having appreciation for those that make you look good on game day. For our football players who go out on Sundays, everyone who does the behind the scenes work really sets them up for success, and so having the opportunity to see what goes on behind the scenes, I think was really unique and impactful for me, just to gain appreciation for the operations and everything that goes on. Plus, getting to know the players and having them to make jokes around you is always a plus as well. So it was twofold, great work, but also a great opportunity just to gain a personal connection.
And Kenny, I have heard through the grapevine that you would work your rear end off, but you just never got paid for it. We might have to rethink that model. But you did your high school video yearbook. You volunteered all the time at Pace doing, helping with the theatrical productions for the very infamous Dr. Mingert. You were always working on producing because you had a passion very early on in life. But what did you learn from all of that?
I think actually my first job was landscaping because I was in charge of weeding. Remember? I was on weeding patrol, so that was my allowance.
Did you get paid for that?
I did. That's how I got my allowance. First, I got to throw some love to my brothers. I hope they know this. I'm incredibly proud and impressed by both of them because I think about the responsibility and the pressures that they've inherited and the expectations on them. And their work ethic is absolutely extraordinary. They're both brilliant. Again, they know a lot about sports, a lot more than I do, and sports business. And they're just both incredibly impressive. And I think, all these things we've been talking about, work ethics and values, I mean, these are not things I don't remember any conversations at the dinner table where we sat down and say, okay, here's our family values. Here's our work ethic. I mean, that's all things that just have to be modeled. And you have to model that. I try to do that with my family now, and my mother and father both did that, and that's just something that has to be truly lived in, and I think that's true with me, all my siblings. I was kind of the oddball. I was the freak of the family. I mean, let me tell you, my interests were so different. I mean, I was the weird kid who doing puppets and making movies and a total news nut. No social life.
You lived for disaster.
I mean, I had some really strange tastes. I had no idea where they came from. Well, I do know one that my grandmother Molly of blessed memory, she did expose me to the arts, and I think that's where my love from the arts came. But to my parents' credit, they both gave us, me, Dean, and Danielle, just really kind of free rein to explore our passions. And I was watching the Tony Awards last night. I think all the Tony winners got up and said, I'm here because my parents believed in me and let me explore my interests and passions. I called my mother on the way over here and she reminded me, well, they didn't say the parents, they said it was the mother who let them explore their interests. But no, in fairness, Dad, you did too. So in our case, it was both mother and father, which was just, what an incredible blessing. And you probably all know Jeff Galloway, the brilliant NYU marketing scholar who's got a podcast. He's on CNN a lot, Bill Maher. He said, around graduation time right now, this is terrible advice to give graduates. Go follow your passions. We need people out there like doing the jobs that nobody else wants to do, the work ethic. I mean, I think there's a happy balance. You can find your passion in anything that you do and have that work ethic. And as the cliche goes, if you're loving some part of what you're doing every day, it's not work. And so I've been fortunate to be able to pursue those passions, and I haven't thought about it as work.
Well, I've got
one quick story with Kenny and my mother, which he might tell, but when she was in her 80s and 90s and lived in Atlanta before she passed away, 3 months short of 100, Kenny would still, usually several times a year, he would pick her up. She was living in a senior citizen home, and not very far from where we were, so we went to visit her on a regular basis. But Kenny would take her to her favorite Chinese restaurant and then take her to the opera. And so, and she was already late 80s, early 90s and what have you, but without fail, Kenny would do that. And that's, partly what makes him a special person and a special son and a grandson, but also where he got connected to the arts in such beautiful ways as he carried forward today.
So I'm going to show a slide, the next one. So this is something Josh wrote in middle school as a poem. He's probably embarrassed that this is up there. But the last of it says that he wants to be a basketball coach and the owner of the Atlanta Falcons. So obviously this is something that he has been thinking about for a long time and working towards. And then the next slide is Josh and Max at training camp, where they've been working since they were little. The next one, and there's Kenny, when he was a young man, that's actually his mother-in-law in the photo, with a video camera. And the reason I wanted you all to see this is that what's interesting about the three of them is they've all known from an early age what they've wanted to do and where their passion was. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that because there are a lot of young men in the room who are trying to figure out, okay, what do I want to do? Who do I want to be? How do I want to get there? So if you could talk a little bit about what you've done along the way strategically to put you in the position of where you're at today, and while you're doing that, if you could describe your current role, because there's so much to be proud of with each of you. So I'm going to start with you, Kenny.
Well, I guess I should take back the part I said, don't follow your passions. Yeah, you should follow your passions. No, I mean, look, I think it's, Rotary, this is what Rotary's, to me, all about. Connections and the incredible leadership in this community. So I guess my advice would be, find someone who does what you are really interested in and want to do and love doing. Find someone who's doing it the best they can and spend time with them. I mean, I think about my first job out of college was working for the mayor's office under Maynard Jackson. My former boss is here, Steve Leibovitz. And, you know, all these mentors in my life, like Steve, like so many other people that, you know, I knew what my passions were, but to find people who are doing it the best and to be able to tap into that and learn from the best.
And tell them what you're doing now.
What am I doing now?
Yeah, tell everybody.
Now.
Yeah. What's that led to? Yeah.
Well, so now I'm director of the largest Jewish film festival in the world. We attract 40,000 attendees annually to this great celebration of great international film. And people ask me the success of the film festival. I say it is bringing the best and brightest of our community together. I'm able to tap in. We have an amazing board, incredible volunteer leadership who has grown this festival over 23 years. And I think that's really on the shoulders of a lot of the best and brightest leadership of this community that I've been able to bring together to support the growth of this great arts organization.
But you've kind of built your resume along the way. You worked in news, you used to have overnight hours. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, that was fun. So my previous role was a journalist, worked as a producer, TV overnights, as you said. So go to work at 11 o'clock at night, come home at 8 o'clock in the morning, and sleep all day. But loved it. I mean, if you're a news junkie and you're a journalist, I know, Maria, you're out there somewhere. You live this and breathe this every day. And again, that's when you're following your passions, you don't think about it as work. So, yeah, that was an incredible experience. TV news producer, Channel 11, the NBC affiliate here in Atlanta. Made a lot of friends, met a lot of extraordinary people through that journey. I think the constant in all of that is a curiosity. You know, having a curiosity about the world, our community, the people who make Atlanta a special place to call home. So yeah, curiosity is sort of a guiding principle for me in everything that I do.
And Joshua, can you talk a little bit about the path you've been on and where you're at now and the kind of deliberate steps that you've been working on to build this base of knowledge to come back and help your dad someday?
Yeah, well, the basketball coach thing definitely isn't going to work out. So we're all good on that front. For me, you know, growing up playing sports, being around sports, I always saw, you know, that the power of sports had on people and bringing communities together from different backgrounds, I think is something that I loved, especially playing soccer, which is a global game. You know, you bring people from so many different backgrounds, which is just incredibly special, and just the happiness sports brings. So I knew that once my playing career was over, which was not going to be a very long playing career, that I wanted to transition more to the business side, so that way I could continue carrying on my passion for sports, but marry it with something that I could do long term. So I know my big boss was here about 2 months ago speaking to you also. He doesn't know I'm here right now, so I'm not sure if I would be able to keep my job.
That's Roger Goodell, in case anybody out there was wondering.
So yes, I'm working for the NFL. I've done so for the last 3 years now up in New York. I work on consulting, so I focus on local business optimization for all 32 clubs, ensuring that they're maximizing revenue. I specifically focus on the ticketing side of the business and also how teams are growing their brands globally to impact their business locally. So for me, you know, gaining experience and learning from what other teams are doing at a high level to ensure they're maximizing themselves, so then one day when I do come back to Atlanta, I can take what I've learned from all 31 other teams and apply it to us here in Atlanta. So it's been a great opportunity, something I love. Living in New York is also near and dear to my heart. You know, followed in my older brother's footsteps as someone who went to NYU, obviously, and my dad's as well, who grew up there and was born there. So for me, it's just continuing in a blank tradition of living in New York. And the NFL has been a great experience to do that.
And Max, you're a rising senior at the University of Tennessee, but you have also been, through the years, taking steps every summer to get you into a place to what you want to do. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, well, so from an early age, I've known I have a love for football. I mean, I think I knew when I was about 10 when the Falcons would lose, and I would cry after every loss. So I knew.
Unfortunately, he was crying a lot.
I knew right away that I at least loved the sport, but as I went on, I kind of learned about which aspects of the sport I love, and it's more of the scouting side for me, where watch the players and decide if they're a good fit. But the summer of my freshman year of high school was the first year I did an internship with the Falcons, and they gave me a bunch of players to watch, and I'd write reports and talk about my thoughts on them. Granted, at the time, I knew not much at all, and they were not great. But each summer, I did the same thing over and over and over and got better at it and learned more. And now I'm on, I think, my 7th year of doing those internships, and I have a much greater knowledge of the sport and feel more comfortable with it. But in college as well, I've worked in sports for the first 2 years. I worked at Tennessee in recruiting, which was interesting because if anybody in here follows college football, the first year I was there, they were awful. It was last year of the Jeremy Pruitt era, and they had all these recruiting violations. And for my first semester in office, there were only 2 people in the building who weren't students. So I kind of got to see the bad sides of football in that way, but just each year just trying to expose myself to football in every way I can to continue to learn, and I've loved it, and I hope to continue.
So Arthur, you've been very deliberate in how you've approached both Josh and Max learning the business, and there are a lot of family businesses out here in the audience. What would you say about, you know, how you've done that, why you've done that, and what you've seen from Max and Josh?
Well, and I would certainly include Kylie in that because she's obviously heavily invested in our businesses in Montana. She's at University of Denver now doing her master's in environmental sciences, and she's actually going to do a report to the foundation this coming Friday on some work. But I think that it's very important for each of our children, and you well know this, Stephanie, to climb their own mountains and to develop their own passions, develop areas of interest. So, you know, whether it been at Home Depot or any of the existing businesses we have today, which, you know, some people would say might be more fun than Home Depot, and probably are from, you know, from a consumer standpoint, not consumer standpoint, but from a fan standpoint. You know, it's always been expose them, give them an opportunity. If it's something that catches their heart and their spirit and their motivation, it's great. If it doesn't, it's fine. And then making sure that they go through all the disciplines of working their way up slowly, because we fundamentally always believe, I always believe that, you know, the basic truths in all of our businesses come from the people who are closest to the people that we serve, guests, fans, customers, but the people that serve them. So it means spending time, like Max is doing this week in the stadium, that Josh has done. They both have done a training camp in the case of Flowery Branch. Max, Joshua took a gap year after high school, was the 3rd associate we hired for that year that started Atlanta United, which, you know, is ESPN, looking back, says the greatest launch of a professional sports team in the history of the United States, and Josh was in the middle of that. What Kenny didn't tell you is that today, you know, the Atlanta Jewish Film Festival is the largest in the world. When Kenny took it over, 20 years ago, something in that area. It was probably the smallest in the world. I mean, honestly, and that's not an exaggeration. So it's amazing what each of them have done with their own passions. The other thing I would say, and this is kind of point of reflection, which Kenny brought up earlier. Max and I had dinner together the other night, maybe a little bit more than a week or so ago, and we're sitting outside and looking at this beautiful backyard that we have. And I said to Max, your father's extraordinarily blessed. So he looked at me and I looked at me like, why would that be, Dad? Because, I have 6 children, and all 3 of them are engaged in things that, businesses and foundation work that have tremendous purpose in life. So my 3 older children, Kenny, Dina, and Danielle, all are heavily engaged in our foundation in a whole variety of different ways. So I have an opportunity, which is a blessing, and an opportunity for me to work with them in that capacity. And then to have Josh and Kylie and Max, I have an opportunity to work with them now as my years go on, to see them grow and take over and become more responsible in our existing businesses is an unbelievable blessing for me. So when I look at, and then them as they begin to transition now into the foundation as well. So, we're doing a lot of work on the future growth of the foundation, the size and scaling of the foundation. And, with the great fortune and success that we've had collectively over many, many years, we'll end up with one of the largest private foundations today in the United States. And I couldn't feel better in that my 6 children will be around the table, whether their father is there or not, as the board, and making decisions about directions and funding and resource allocations and things of that nature. So it's a great point in my life. I mean, I wish I was, 60 years younger or 40 years younger or whatever it may be, but to see the product of these 6 children and 2 great mothers and everything that they've done, and what I have a chance to work with them now is an extraordinary blessing for me. And I couldn't be happier in that regard.
So because we've got an insider view, and because Father's Day is coming up, I'm going to ask the 3 of you to share something that drives you bonkers about your dad, and something that you adore about your dad. And I know, Kenny, you've probably got one lined up already.
Oh, gosh. Faye, I'm looking at you. When he's got a point, boy, he will drive that point home. He will nail that point, nail that hammer again and again and again. And look, I think that's both it can drive you a little crazy, but also important. I mean, it's like kind of the conversation we were talking about earlier. I mean, the importance to reiterate, the principles by which you live your life, by how you run your business, the values that form the work of the foundation. You got to keep coming back to those things again and again. You just can't assume them. So I think, Dad, we heard you. You've been heard.
Okay, and the part you just love.
Gosh, he's nobody understands the sense of humor he has. So that is probably the greatest joy in my life is when I can make him laugh and hear his just uproarious laugh, which is something most people don't get to hear, because
there's nothing like
he's
an Arthur
intense,
laugh.
Serious business guy. He's Arthur Blank and whoa. But he's got a very goofy side, and that's the part that I love and love bringing out in him.
All right, Max.
I would say the part that can drive me crazy, and I think this honestly runs in our family a little bit, is he can be very stubborn. And as I said, we are all that way to an extent. But I honestly think that's also partially why he is so successful, is because he's had many ups and downs in his career, but he doesn't take no for an answer in terms of succeeding. And so I think that's part of what has driven him to where he is now. Part of what I love about him is that he is always looking to give back to others in the community and to us. I mean, if we're eating dinner, he'll always purposely order too much, and then we'll say, here, have some of this, or here, have some of this, and we'll keep saying, no, I'm full, and he'll keep offering, because he just wants to keep giving to us. So as annoying as it can be when he keeps offering, keeps offering, keeps offering. I know it's coming from a great place.
He had a Jewish mother.
Josh?
I would say the selective memory. They're
You have no idea what he's talking about, do you?
I don't actually. I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, you just don't remember.
yeah, exactly. There are times when there are certain things that one of us as kids will tell him about something we're doing, or maybe a suggestion that we have about his life, and 6 months later he'll say, well, why didn't you say something about that? And we'll tell him we did, and we warned him, or we gave him this advice, but a good excuse is that he always has so much going on and so many other things to worry about that maybe it gets lost in the shuffle. As far as things that I admire about him, I mean, there's endless. I think one thing for me is that obviously he shows tremendous amount of love to his family, but I would say also to those around him. I'm very fortunate that my friends, my girlfriend, anyone who gets to interact with him on a day-to-day basis, they feel like they're being treated as if they're family as well, and I think that's something that I try to emulate. I definitely will never be able to do as good a job as he does, but I think just the ability to show care and passion for others about their daily lives is something that's truly impactful, and I think leaves a lasting memory on someone, whether it be someone you interact with on a day-to-day basis, or who you may only interact with once in your life.
So we...
Do we get to put that question to you, Stephanie?
Next. It's the eyebrow wag that gets me every time.
I can't turn the table.
I know. I said I am the interviewer, not the interviewee. But we do have time for a couple of questions from the audience. I'm going to stick to the younger sons first. We're going to go, I know normally we only let Rotarians ask questions, but we've got to let a young man in the audience who might want to ask something. So are there any guys in the audience who want to ask a question? Okay, is there anybody that wants to ask a question? Yes, Bill.
Arthur, you talked about your mother quite a bit, but you haven't really told us a lot about what she did for you and some of your fondest memories, lessons you learned when you were growing up.
Thank you for the question. All my grandparents came through Ellis Island, so they had that experience of the Lower East Side, trying to find their ways, trying to develop a life, trying to develop a way to make a living, raise a family, and so I think my mother comes out of that kind of environment. She was very religious, I would say, from a spiritual standpoint, very committed to Israel, very committed to being Jewish. From a ceremonial standpoint, she wouldn't go to services all the time. But I think so, our faith and the importance of our faith and the importance of tzedakah, giving back, making the world a better place, trying to heal the world, another expression that's believed by many faiths, was something that was ingrained in me at a very early age. We had no money. We lived in a single-bedroom apartment. My brother and I shared the one bedroom. My mother and father shared a pull-out little sofa thing in the foyer. We had one bathroom. But my mother, even in those early times, always found ways to give back, be involved in the community, always had a voice of principle, always trying to make a difference, always stood up for what she thought was the right thing to do. So I learned that, the concept of, do the right things for the right reasons and live with the consequences is something that really came early from my mother and our values that way. And it was, really true on all sides of my family. So I think, those values that were instilled, and I would speak for Bernie if I can. Bernie's parents are both gone, but he was sitting up here. Bernie would say the same thing. Much of his values really came from his mother in significant ways. So, very powerful woman, strongly opinionated, strongly principled. Well, Stephanie's smiling. I mean, any of my three wives would tell you that she had some endearing, wonderful points, but she could be a very difficult woman as well. But some of that just came out of, try and do the right things for the right reasons. So she was a very powerful force in my life. And I think it's, even in her passing, and I visit her periodically, she had a bigger impact on my life than I even realized really when I was younger. I would say that's for sure. The other thing which is interesting, this is an aside, which all three kids, they do note sometimes, and fail to acknowledge this in my business leaders, I will tend to repeat myself sometimes. But it's interesting what that comes from. It comes from being a stutterer. It doesn't come because I don't think they hear me, but because, particularly when I was younger, I was a pretty significant stutter. And so when you're a stutterer, often you repeat yourself. You want to repeat yourself because you're not sure that you may have had a blockage, you may have skipped a word, you may not have made sense potentially to somebody who's listening. So you tend to repeat yourself to make sure you're being heard. So it's not because I don't think the kids are not good listeners. It's because, somewhere early in my life, being a stutterer, that notion of maybe I should say it again, or maybe I should say it a little differently because maybe it didn't get across the same way, was probably part of who I am as well.
Clark?
So you guys have built some incredible businesses, and a lot of your passions seem to be around sports and entertainment. And when you think of sports and entertainment, it has this ability to build community and bring people together and create these experiences. And I'm just curious, as you look out in the future, what do you see as the role of sports and entertainment in this new world to really bring people even more together? And what is the future? What can we expect from sports and entertainment going forward?
Let me at least speak for the sports standpoint. People sometimes they look at our businesses today. A football team, a world-class stadium that's ranked number one in the United States. A soccer team, guest ranches, golf superstores, etc. People say, gee, they're so different. Topography is different. Everything about them is different, different parts of the country, and all that's true. But the one thing they all have in common, which is in common with the Home Depot as well, is that each one of those businesses, their major responsibility is to make the fans, the guests, and the customers happy, to make them feel fulfilled, to make them feel like they're appreciated, to make them feel like they're acknowledged and they're an important part of what we're all about, and that our focus is on them through our associates, but it's on them and then reaching out further to the community. So what's in common in all of that is making people happy. So, I often tease our associates as the reality is we shouldn't even pay you. I mean, each one of our businesses, you come to work every day and you're making people happy. You're making people feel better about themselves. So sports in a broad sense does one beautiful thing, which we need more of in this world today than we ever have before. Rabbi Burr could comment on that with more authority than I can, but we are more polarized than we've ever been in our history. My football analogy is that, this country used to be played between the 30-yard lines. That's where we played our country, 30 to 30. Now it's being played in the goal line to 30 and goal line to 30. So, anything we can do in sport to bring people together, whether you go to a soccer match, and you see the kind of diversity we have in that building, or come to a football game, we have the largest diverse population of any team today in the National Football League. Our guest ranches, all these businesses. We're working with the PGA Tour. We're working with First Tee to bring young men and women of diverse backgrounds into golf, et cetera, and other things as well. So, I think sport can bring people together in the best sense of community, connecting to each other, whether it be in a physical building or rooting together, et cetera. And I think today, when we're dealing with the mental stresses and the mental unhealthiness that we see in our world today, the more physical contact, the more personal contact, the more you can do more of that, which each of our businesses require. Each of our businesses require. We were voted number one last year in the NFL and Major League Soccer for the number one for fan experience inside of our building. We now hold more concerts than any other stadium in the United States today, bring people together for incredible, joyful experiences. So from a sports standpoint, and a little bit from an entertainment standpoint, Kenny can talk, obviously much more with greater authority on the entertainment part of it. But I do think that it does, at its finest, brings people together. And then being connected and giving back to the communities So whether it be in our Home Depot backyard, which is now a community park, and everything we can do to connect to our businesses and connect people in our businesses. So I'm looking here at B. Perez, who's been a great friend and a very senior officer at Coke, who's led that work for Coca-Cola for many, many years. And so I think it's incredibly important that we continue to do that. It's the best of us when we're together. So I'm sorry for the long answer, but it's a great question, seriously great question. Kenny?
Kenny, I know that you saw a lot of changes during the pandemic, and you've still felt the effects of that even now that we can all get back together. What have you seen, and what is the film festival trying to do to get people to reconnect actually in person? Because film is such an easy medium to watch at home.
Well, certainly, Dad, echo everything that you said, and it's such a great observation. I think about that myself a lot. What's the connection between all these different things? I think it is about connecting people. Film, football, sports, it's about a shared experience, and I think coming out of the pandemic, we value that more than ever. The arts, sports bring us together for a shared experience, one thing we can all agree on, a great movie or rooting for our favorite team. I think, and really expand this even to Home Depot, I think the priority for us, to answer your question, we are focused on providing the best experience for in our case, our audience, the customers, the fans. That is something that really starts from the Home Depot days and something I've learned from Home Depot. We spend, my role as executive artistic director of our film festival, we spend a lot of time thinking about what goes up on the screen. I'm spending even more time thinking about providing that incredible experience for that moviegoer, from the time they buying the tickets to walking in the theater door, the choice of venues, the kind of experience inside the auditorium, the parking. All these considerations that people don't. Football fans are watching the game. I don't think most people have a clue what goes on behind the scenes, the incredible amount of work and thought that goes into delivering the first-class fan experience, and all these details that have nothing to do with what's going on on the field. So I think in all of these different areas we're talking about, people, that powerful magnet of the sofa now that COVID brought about, it takes a lot more now to get people to get off their seats, get out of the house, and come out and have a unique experience. So in our respective industries, we have to work that much harder to provide an unparalleled experience and remind us of what we love about coming together as a community and having a shared experience.
Yeah, the other thing, I know we're running over, and I apologize, Stephanie, but I want to make another point about what Kenny said. If you go to the Atlanta Jewish Film Festival, films, as many people in this room have done or have done and will do and continue to do, it's not really about becoming Jewish or anything of that nature. But the stress is more often than not is seeing the world from a different perspective and somebody else's viewpoint. And to get to your question again, and my political comment on your question, our ability as human beings to see the world through other people's eyes and to understand where they are coming from before we have an opinion on where we're coming from is invaluable. And I think that the work that Kenny and the whole film crew does in selecting the films brilliantly brings people together to look at things and ask questions and seek answers that ordinarily they may not. And that's a great blessing, Kenny. So thank you so much.
Well, I know we had more audience questions, but we have officially run over time. But I want to thank each of you for this extraordinary opportunity to be with people I love on this stage. It's hard to be an objective interviewer, journalist person when you love everybody. But I am also proud of all of you and what you've all accomplished. And thank you for letting our Rotary audience see all of that today. So please join me in thanking the Blank Boys.
Thank you.